The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, materializing on Dr. Maya Rodriguez's ancient holographic display with a soft chime that cut through the comfortable silence of her cramped university office. She barely noticed it at first, too absorbed in the scattered papers covering her desk, each filled with her characteristic scrawl of mathematical notation that her colleagues often joked looked more like abstract art than equations. The header caught her eye only because it actually sparkled, with an iridescence that shouldn't have been possible on her budget-grade display. Invitation, 2847th Grand Galactic Mathematical Congress. Nexus 9 Station. Maya pushed her thick-rimmed glasses up her nose and leaned forward, the springs of her worn office chair protesting. She'd heard of the Congress, of course. Every mathematician in the known galaxy had. But humans had never been invited. Not once in the 30 years since first contact. Computer, she called out, verify authenticity of last received message. Message authenticated. Origin, Galactic Mathematical Society. Quantum encryption signature verified. Timestamp, 1427 GST. Maya let out a low whistle. This wasn't some graduate student's idea of a prank. This was real. The message expanded as she touched it, filling her office with a holographic display that made her cheap projector whine in protest. An elegant alien script flowed through the air, automatically translating itself into Earth Standard English. Dr. Maya Rodriguez, Terra University Mathematics Department. Your recent paper on Intuitive Approaches to Nonlinear Dimensional Mathematics has drawn the attention of the Congress Selection Committee. We extend an invitation to present your methodology at the upcoming Grand Galactic Mathematical Congress. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She'd published that paper 6 months ago, and it had been largely dismissed by her peers on Earth as too speculative and insufficiently rigorous. She'd written it late one night, fueled by coffee and inspiration, approaching complex dimensional mathematics from what she called a gut-feeling perspective rather than traditional proofs. The message continued. While some members of the committee have expressed reservations about including methodologies from emerging species, your unique perspective may offer value to our discussions of the grand theorem of dimensional causality. Maya's hands trembled slightly. The grand theorem, the most famous unsolved mathematical problem in the galaxy. 2,000 years of the finest alien minds had tried and failed to crack it. She'd read about it in mathematics journals, but most of the concepts were so advanced they didn't even have human language equivalents yet. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Rodriguez? It was her department head, Dr. Chen, looking unusually pale. I just received a rather unusual communication from the Galactic Academic Council about the Congress invitation. Maya stood up, scattering papers. I just got it too. I can't believe they're sending a delegation. Dr. Chen interrupted, his voice tight with stress. Here, today, something about evaluating the candidate's suitability. Maya, do you understand what you've done? Your paper, it's caused quite a stir out there. Before Maya could respond, a deep thrumming filled the building. Through her small window, she could see a sleek silver ship descending onto the university's central quad, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Students were already gathering, pointing, and taking pictures with their phones. They're here, Dr. Chen whispered unnecessarily. The next hour was a blur of activity. Maya's office was quickly filled with an assortment of alien beings that seemed to defy the laws of physics and biology. There was High Scholar Vexna, a crystalline entity that floated in a containment field and spoke through light pulses. Besides them stood Professor Orcs, a towering insectoid mathematician whose compound eyes seemed to process multiple dimensions simultaneously. 2 more beings remained near the door, one a shifting cloud of intelligent gas, the other a silicon-based life form that looked like animated obsidian. Dr. Rodriguez, High Scholar Vexna's translation matrix converted their light pulses into crisp English. Your paper suggests an approach to dimensional mathematics that our species would consider primitive, Yet there is an elegance to your intuitive reasoning that we find intriguing. Primitive. Maya felt her face flush. With all due respect, high scholar, sometimes the simplest solution is the most elegant. You've all been approaching the grand theorem from the same angle for 2,000 years. Maybe what you need is a fresh perspective. The silicon being near the door made a sound like crystal chimes, their version of laughter. The Death Worlder shows spirit, but spirit does not solve mathematical proofs. Dr. Rodriguez. The grand theorem requires the highest level of mathematical rigor. Maya stood her ground. Mathematics isn't just about rigor. It's about seeing patterns, making connections. Humans might be new to galactic mathematics, but we've been finding patterns since we first looked up at the stars. Sometimes you need to step back from the equations and see the bigger picture. High scholar Vexna's crystalline structure shifted colors, indicating deep thought. Your species does have a remarkable history of solving problems through unconventional means. Perhaps that is precisely what the grand theorem requires. However, we must warn you. Presenting at the Congress will not be easy. Many will oppose your presence there. Because I'm human. Because you represent change. Professor X clicked through their mandibles. The Congress has followed the same mathematical traditions for millennia. Your methods, your very way of thinking, challenge those traditions. Are you prepared for the resistance you will face? Maya looked around her small office, at the papers filled with her primitive calculations, at the ancient holographic display, still struggling to render the alien message. Then she thought about the grand theorem, about the possibility of seeing something that 2,000 years of brilliant minds had missed, simply because they'd all been looking at it the same way. I'm prepared, she said firmly. When do we leave? The gaseous being swirled in what might have been approval. The Congress begins in 3 Earth days. A ship will be provided. You may bring your research materials, though your computational devices will be inadequate for Congress-level mathematics. As the delegation prepared to leave, High Scholar Vexna lingered. Dr. Rodriguez, one final question. In your paper, you mentioned mathematical intuition several times. This is not a concept we fully understand. How can one intuit mathematics without complete computational analysis? Maya smiled, picking up a piece of paper covered in her scattered notations. High scholar, when you look at the stars, do you see points of light, or do you see patterns? Stories. Mathematics is the same way. Sometimes you have to feel the equation before you can solve it. The crystalline being's colors shifted through several spectrums before they responded. Perhaps that is exactly what we have been missing. We will see you at the Congress, Dr. Rodriguez. Do try not to upend 2,000 years of mathematical tradition too quickly. As the alien delegation departed, Maya sank back into her chair, her heart racing. In 3 days, she would stand before the greatest mathematical minds in the galaxy. She would either make history or become a cautionary tale about human presumption. Looking at her reflection in the now dark holographic display, she grinned. Either way, she was about to show the galaxy that humans had something unique to offer to the mathematical universe, even if they weren't quite ready for it. Maya's first glimpse of Nexus 9 through the transport ship's viewing portal left her breathless. The space station was a mathematical wonder in itself, a massive structure of interconnected geometric shapes that seemed to fold through dimensions she could barely perceive. It rotated slowly against the backdrop of a binary star system, its crystalline surfaces refracting light in complex patterns that she suspected were themselves mathematical formulas. Magnificent, isn't it? The ship's pilot, a bioluminescent being named Zix 427, pulsed with gentle colors. The station's architecture is based on the first 1,000 solutions to the lesser theorems of spatial harmony. Each segment represents a different proof. Maya pressed her hand against the cool surface of the viewport. It's like seeing mathematics come alive, she whispered. Her mind was already racing, noting patterns in the station's structure that reminded her of the intuitive diagrams she often drew in the margins of her work. The docking procedure was automated, their small ship guided into one of thousands of berths by invisible fields. As they waited for the atmospheric equilibration, Zix 427's lights dimmed to a serious blue. Dr. Rodriguez, a word of caution. The Congress, it can be overwhelming for first-timers, especially for humans, Maya supplied with a wry smile. For innovators, Zix 427 corrected diplomatically. The mathematical community here is ancient and set in its ways. Change comes slowly when it comes at all. The docking bay doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing a reception committee that made the delegation to Earth look modest. Dozens of alien mathematicians lined the walkway, their various environmental suits and containment fields creating a shimmer of technologies Maya had only read about. She straightened her jacket, chosen carefully for the occasion, though she suspected her attempt at formal dress meant little to beings who experienced color in 11 dimensions. High Scholar Vexna floated forward to greet her. "Welcome to Nexus 9, Dr. Rodriguez. The Congress formally begins tomorrow, but first, we thought you might appreciate a tour of our computational facilities." The next few hours were a blur of wonders. Maya was shown vast chambers where quantum computers the size of buildings processed mathematical proofs, halls where gaseous mathematicians swirled in complex patterns that represented ongoing calculations, and libraries where mathematical texts were stored in crystals that existed partially in other dimensions. But it was the theorem chamber that truly took her breath away. The massive spherical room was dedicated to the display and study of the grand theorem of dimensional causality. The equation itself floated in the center, a holographic representation that twisted and turned through space in ways that made Maya's eyes water. "Beautiful, isn't it?" A voice like rustling leaves came from behind her. Maya turned to see a being that seemed to be made of living mathematical symbols, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves. "I'm Professor Phi, head of the Theoretical Applications Division. I've been studying this theorem for 3 centuries. Maya watched as the equation rotated, its symbols morphing through different mathematical languages. "It's different than I expected," she said slowly. "In the journals, it seemed more rigid, static." Professor Phi's symbols rippled with what might have been amusement. That's the problem with traditional publication. The theorem exists in multiple mathematical dimensions simultaneously. What you're seeing here is just a shadow of its true form. Maya stepped closer, her hand unconsciously reaching out toward the floating symbols. "But there's a pattern here. Look at how these variables interact. It's almost like they're dancing around each other." A murmur ran through the gathered mathematicians. Nobody touched the theorem's display. It simply wasn't done. "Fascinating," Professor Phi mused. "You see it as a dance. We've always approached it as a battle, forces opposing each other, seeking dominance through proof." "That's the problem," Maya said, excitement creeping into her voice. "You're all looking for opposition, for conflict. But what if these elements aren't fighting? What if they're working together, creating something new through their interaction?" The murmur grew louder, more concerned. A crystalline mathematician near the back of the chamber shattered in apparent distress, their containment field quickly gathering the pieces. High Scholar Vexna moved forward quickly. "Perhaps we should continue the tour." "The residential quarters." "No, wait," Maya insisted, her eyes still fixed on the theorem. "Look at this section here. In your mathematical language, these symbols represent dimensional constants, right? But if you look at them from a different angle," she walked around the display, gesturing enthusiastically, "they could also be representing dimensional variables. The whole thing transforms if you just shift your perspective." "Impossible," a silicon-based mathematician clacked in agitation. "The dimensional constants are constant. They have been verified across all known space-time configurations." "In your frame of reference," Maya countered. "But what if there are frames of reference you haven't considered? What if?" "I believe that's quite enough excitement for one day," High Scholar Vexna interrupted firmly. "Dr. Rodriguez must be tired from her journey. The Congress begins tomorrow, And there will be plenty of time for theoretical discussions then. As Maya was led away from the theorem chamber, she could hear the heated discussions breaking out behind her. Mathematical proofs were being thrown back and forth in dozens of languages, some of them producing visible distortions in space-time. In her assigned quarters, a surprisingly comfortable room adapted for human biology, Maya couldn't sleep. She sat at the provided desk, scribbling in her notebook the old-fashioned way, trying to capture what she'd seen in the theorem's dance. The patterns were there, just at the edge of her understanding, teasing her with their elegance. A message chimed on her room's communication system. It was from Professor Phi. Your perspective is disturbing to many here, but perhaps disturbing is what we need. Be careful tomorrow. Not everyone appreciates having their constants turned into variables. Maya looked down at her notes, where she'd unconsciously drawn a pattern that looked surprisingly like the station's architecture. Tomorrow she would present her ideas to the Congress. Tomorrow she would either change mathematics forever or become a galactic laughingstock. She smiled and kept writing. After all, some of humanity's greatest breakthroughs had started with someone being laughed at. The Congress Hall hummed with a nervous energy that transcended species. Maya stood at the presentation platform, surrounded by mathematical holograms that made Earth's most advanced technology look like children's toys. Before her, tier upon tier of seated beings rose into the distance, some floating, some shimming, some existing in states of matter she couldn't quite comprehend. High Scholar Vexna's voice resonated through the chamber. We now recognize Dr. Maya Rodriguez of Earth, presenting her paper on intuitive approaches to nonlinear dimensional mathematics, with proposed applications to the Grand Theorem. Maya took a deep breath. She'd spent half the night practicing with the alien holographic controls, and now her hands moved with deliberate confidence as she brought up her first visualization. Distinguished colleagues, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. For 2,000 years, we've approached the Grand Theorem as a problem of proof, a sequence of logical steps leading to an inevitable conclusion. Today, I propose we've been asking the wrong questions entirely. The hologram shifted, showing the theorem in its traditional form. Then, with a gesture, Maya rotated it, not just in three-dimensional space, but through conceptual dimensions that made several of the silicon-based mathematicians crack with distress. Consider this, she continued. We've always assumed the theorem describes the relationship between dimensional constants, but what if these aren't constants at all? What if they're patterns, rhythms in the fabric of space-time itself? A gasp rippled through the audience. Near the front, Professor Phi's mathematical symbols swirled with interest, while several crystalline beings vibrated in what might have been outrage. Absurd. The voice came from Dr. Axnine, a prominent theoretical mathematician composed of pure energy. The dimensional constants have been verified across 12,000 galaxies. They are the foundation of our understanding of spacetime. Maya nodded, having anticipated this objection. Yes, they've been verified, in stable spacetime. But look at the behavior of these variables near gravitational singularities, or during quantum fluctuation events. She brought up another visualization, this one showing data from her own research. The patterns change, but they change in predictable ways, ways that the theorem might actually be trying to tell us about. The chamber erupted in discussion, mathematical proofs flying back and forth so rapidly that the translation matrices struggled to keep up. Maya pressed on, her excitement building as she reached the core of her argument. But here's the real breakthrough, she said, manipulating the hologram again. If we consider these constants as dynamic patterns rather than fixed values, suddenly the theorem's most puzzling aspects make sense. Look at this section here. It's not describing a mathematical law. It's describing a process, a dance of dimensions that we've been trying to freeze in place instead of letting it move. This is madness, Dr. Axnine flared brightly. You cannot simply redefine fundamental mathematical constants based on human intuition. Why not? Maya challenged. Your own historical records show that mathematical breakthroughs often come from questioning basic assumptions. the Thoraxian revolution in quantum mathematics, the Zix paradigm shift. These came from mathematicians willing to see beyond established conventions. High scholar Vexna floated forward. Dr. Rodriguez, while your creative approach is interesting, the implications are disturbing. If the dimensional constants are indeed variable patterns, it would mean our entire understanding of space-time mathematics is incomplete, Maya finished. Not wrong, just incomplete. And isn't that exciting? Think of the possibilities. If we can understand these patterns, predict their rhythms, we might be able to manipulate them. The applications for space travel alone would be revolutionary. A new voice cut through the chaos. She's right. Professor Fay moved to the center of the chamber, their mathematical symbols rearranging rapidly. Look at these correlations. They align perfectly with anomalies we've observed, but never been able to explain. Temporal distortions near certain types of stars, dimensional fluctuations in deep space. Maya felt a surge of hope as several younger mathematicians began nodding, their various appendages and energy fields showing signs of agreement. But the conservative faction, led by Dr. Axnine, wasn't finished. This is precisely why allowing a Deathworlder to address the Congress was a mistake, the energy being pulsed angrily. They lack the fundamental understanding of higher mathematical principles. They try to reduce our elegant proofs to intuitive guesswork. With respect, Dr. Axnine, Maya said firmly, humanity's guesswork put us among the stars before we fully understood the mathematics behind our own technologies. Sometimes you have to leap forward and let the proofs catch up to intuition. The chamber divided into heated debates. Maya could see the younger mathematicians engaging enthusiastically with her ideas, while the older, more established scholars radiated various forms of disapproval. But it was Professor Fiz's next words that changed everything. I propose, the living equation announced, that we put Dr. Rodriguez's theory to a practical test. If she's correct about the dimensional constants being dynamic patterns, we should be able to predict and observe these changes in real time. High scholar Vexna's crystalline structure shifted colors rapidly. What are you suggesting? The station's own space-time sensors, Professor Fay explained. They're the most sensitive in known space. If Dr. Rodriguez can use her understanding of these patterns to predict dimensional fluctuations, I'll do it, Maya said quickly, her heart pounding. Give me access to the sensor data, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. The chamber fell silent. What Professor Fay was suggesting was unprecedented, allowing an outsider, a human no less, access to some of the most advanced mathematical technology in the galaxy. Finally, High Scholar Vexna spoke. The Congress will recess for one standard day. Dr. Rodriguez will be given supervised access to the primary sensor array. If, and only if, she can demonstrate practical applications of her theory, we will consider further investigation of her ideas. As the mathematicians filed out of the chamber, Maya caught Professor Fay's eye. The being's symbols arranged themselves into what she somehow knew was a smile. Well, human, they said, you wanted to show us a new way of seeing mathematics. Tomorrow, you'll get your chance. I hope your intuition is as good as you claim it is. Maya looked down at her notes, covered in the patterns she'd seen dancing through the theorem. So do I, she murmured. So do I. The sensor control room of Nexus 9 was a marvel of mathematical engineering. Curved walls displayed real-time data from thousands of space-time sensors, creating a comprehensive map of dimensional fluctuations across several light years. Maya stood at the central console, surrounded by a mixture of skeptical and curious alien mathematicians. Professor Fay hovered nearby, their mathematical symbols shifting in what Maya had learned to recognize as excitement. The sensors are calibrated to detect the slightest dimensional variance. If your theory about pattern recognition is correct. It is, Maya said, her fingers dancing over the holographic controls. She'd spent half the night studying the sensor systems, marveling at their complexity while recognizing familiar patterns in their operation. Look here, see these regular fluctuations. They're not random noise. They're rhythmic. Dr. Ax-9's energy form pulsed dismissively. We've studied these background variations for centuries. They're quantum foam effects, nothing more. Are they? Maya pulled up a new display, overlaying the last month's sensor data. Watch this pattern. Every 43 hours, there's a spike in dimensional variance. Traditional mathematics says these should be random, but they're not. They're following a pattern that looks exactly like one of the supposedly constant variables in the Grand Theorem. High Scholar Vexna floated closer, their crystalline structure refracting light in complex patterns. Correlation does not imply causation. Dr. Rodriguez, this could be. Wait, Maya interrupted, her eyes fixed on the displays. Watch this sector. According to my calculations, we should see a significant dimensional fluctuation in approximately 3 minutes. The room fell silent. Even the most skeptical mathematicians turned their attention to the indicated region of space. Maya's heart pounded as she watched the countdown in her head, hoping desperately that she hadn't made a mistake in her calculations. 2 minutes. Dr. Rodriguez, Professor Fay's symbols rearranged themselves nervously. If nothing happens. It will, Maya said with more confidence than she felt. The pattern is clear. We've just never looked at it the right way before. 1 minute. Dr. Ax-9's energy field crackled. This is a waste of valuable computational resources. These sensors could be. The displays suddenly erupted with activity. The exact sector Maya had indicated blazed with color as space-time itself seemed to ripple. The sensor readings matched her predictions exactly, down to the amplitude and frequency of the dimensional variations. That's impossible. Dr. Ax-9 flickered in agitation. You couldn't have known. I didn't know, Maya explained, her voice growing excited. I felt it. The pattern was there in the data, just like it's there in the theorem. We'd been so focused on proving each step mathematically that we missed the larger dance happening right in front of us. She quickly adjusted the displays, bringing up another sector. Watch here next. If I'm right about the pattern, we should see a similar fluctuation in about 17 minutes, but with a phase shift of approximately 30 degrees in the quantum dimension. Professor Fay's symbols whirled faster. If you can predict 2 such events, I can predict all of them, Maya said confidently. Because they're all connected. The Grand Theorem isn't just describing how dimensions interact. It's showing us the music they dance to. She worked quickly, programming her predictions into the sensor array. One by one, the displays lit up exactly as she'd forecasted, each dimensional fluctuation following the pattern she'd discovered. The alien mathematicians watched in stunned silence as their most fundamental assumptions about space-time were challenged by this human's intuitive understanding. This changes everything, High Scholar Vexna said finally. If dimensional constants are indeed following predictable patterns, then we can work with them instead of against them, Maya finished. Think about the applications. Space travel could be revolutionized. Ships could ride these dimensional waves instead of fighting against them. We could predict and avoid dangerous space-time anomalies. We might even be able to create stable wormholes by synchronizing with these patterns instead of trying to force our way through dimensions. Dr. Ax-9's energy form had dimmed considerably, but the mathematical proofs, the established theories, are still valid, Maya assured them, just incomplete. Like describing ocean waves with only algebra and never acknowledging that they move in patterns we can see and predict. Sometimes you need to step back from the equations and look at the bigger picture. Professor Finn moved to the central console, their mathematical symbols forming complex equations. The human is right. Look at these correlations. Every prediction matches not just our sensor data, but also previously unexplained anomalies in our space-time calculations. We've been so focused on the trees that we missed the forest. Young alien mathematicians began crowding around the displays, their various appendages and sensory organs absorbing the data with growing excitement. Even some of the more conservative scholars were showing signs of interest, their initial skepticism giving way to scientific curiosity. Maya caught her reflection in one of the dark display panels. She looked exhausted but exhilarated. She'd done more than just prove her theory. She'd shown the galaxy that human intuition and creativity had value, even in the most advanced mathematical circles. High Scholar Vexna's crystalline structure blazed with colors Maya had never seen before. Dr. Rodriguez, the Congress will need to evaluate these findings thoroughly. But I believe it's safe to say that your human perspective has given us much to think about. Would you be willing to remain at Nexus 9 to assist with further research? Maya smiled, already seeing new patterns forming in her mind. I'd be honored, but on one condition. We approach this as true collaboration. Human intuition combined with alien computational power. Together, we might just crack the rest of the grand theorem. Agreed, the High Scholar's colors shifted to what might have been amusement. Though I suspect the galaxy may never be quite the same after this. Change isn't always a bad thing, Maya said, turning back to the displays. Sometimes you have to shake up the constants to find a better pattern. 6 months had transformed the theorem chamber into something its original designers would hardly recognize. Where once a single holographic equation floated in dignified isolation, now a complex web of mathematical visualizations filled the space, pulsing with life and movement. At the center of it all stood Maya Rodriguez, directing the intricate mathematical dance with gestures that had become as natural as breathing. The pattern convergence is holding steady, she announced to the assembled team of human and alien mathematicians. The dimensional resonance is exactly where we predicted it would be. Professor Fizz's mathematical symbols swirled in harmony with the displays. Remarkable. 6 months ago, we thought these patterns were impossible. Now we're using them to revolutionize our understanding of spacetime. The chamber had become the heart of the newly established Human-Alien Collaborative Mathematics Initiative, or HFY as the humans had dubbed it. Teams of mathematicians from across the galaxy worked in shifts, combining alien computational precision with human pattern recognition to unlock the secrets of the grand theorem. High Scholar Vexna floated at the observation level, their crystalline structure reflecting the dancing equations. Dr. Rodriguez, the latest results from the deep space probes have arrived. Would you care to share the findings with the team? Maya grinned, manipulating the holographic controls with practiced ease. New data streams flowed into the chamber, merging with the existing patterns in a spectacular display of mathematical harmony. The probes confirmed everything, she said, her voice filled with quiet triumph. The dimensional patterns we predicted are consistent across all observed space. But here's the really exciting part. Look at these variations near the galactic core. The display zoomed in on a particular set of equations. Even the most skeptical of the alien mathematicians leaned forward with interest. Dr. Axnine, who had become one of Maya's most dedicated collaborators after her initial demonstration, pulsed with excitement. These patterns, the energy being observed, they're showing signs of intelligent manipulation. As if someone else figured this out before us, Maya finished. The patterns near the core show signs of artificial enhancement. Someone, somewhere, has been surfing these dimensional waves for a very long time. The revelation sent a buzz of excitement through the chamber. Professor Fizz's symbols rearranged themselves into complex probability calculations. This could explain the anomalous readings we've detected from that region for centuries. We always assumed they were natural phenomena. Nature doesn't usually create perfectly optimized dimensional resonance patterns, Maya pointed out. This is engineered, and if we can understand their methods, we could revolutionize galactic travel, High Scholar Vexna concluded. The implications for space-time navigation alone are staggering. Maya nodded, already seeing the patterns that would make it possible. In the 6 months since her initial breakthrough, she'd learned to trust her intuition even more. The aliens had learned to trust it too, after seeing prediction after prediction prove accurate. I've already started working on practical applications, she said, bringing up a new set of equations. Look at this. If we apply the pattern recognition principles to standard chip drives, we could potentially increase their efficiency by several orders of magnitude. Ships wouldn't fight against space-time. They'd flow with it. Dr. X9's energy form brightened, like surfing a wave instead of swooning against it. How very human of you to make such an analogy. That's exactly why this collaboration works, Professor Finn noted. We've spent millennia trying to conquer dimensional mathematics through pure logic. Humans showed us we could dance with it instead. Maya smiled, remembering her first view of the theorem 6 months ago. We all brought something essential to this project. Human intuition helped us see the patterns, but we never could have proved them without your computational abilities and mathematical rigor. High Scholar Vexna descended to the main floor, their crystalline structure glowing with what Maya had learned to recognize as pride. The Congress has voted unanimously to establish permanent human representation in all future mathematical initiatives. Your species has earned its place among the galaxy's premier mathematical minds. More than that, Professor Fay added, we've had to create an entirely new branch of mathematics to describe your intuitive approach. The human variable, as it's being called, is already being taught in institutions across the galaxy. Maya looked around the chamber at her colleagues. Beings of crystal and energy, of gas and silicon, all working together to understand the cosmic dance she'd helped them see. 6 months ago, they'd seen her as a primitive curiosity. Now they were equals, each contributing their unique perspective to a greater understanding. So, she said, turning back to the swirling equations, who's ready to see what else these patterns can tell us? I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface. The chamber erupted in enthusiastic responses in a dozen different forms of communication. As Maya began manipulating the displays again, she caught her reflection in a darkened panel. She saw not just herself, but the reflection of a future where human creativity and alien precision worked in harmony, unlocking mysteries that neither could solve alone. Above them, the grand theorem continued its eternal dance, no longer a puzzle to be solved, but a partner in the greatest mathematical collaboration the galaxy had ever seen.